What?
Tell us about your mother and her family.
Oh, mother's family was a Katie.
Your mother was
Mother's
Philip.
mother was a Katie. My mother's mother was a Katie. Katie come over from England and settled in Groton, Massachusetts. And he had a big
Built a
farm
pond.
there. Well, the pond was there.
Isn't that weird?
But he settled in
Yeah.
Groton, Massachusetts. Well, he had children, and two of his children
It's like going back to the scene of the crime, isn't it?
migrated down to, and ended up around Pearson, Georgia. They called it Willacoochee or Big Wheel. And grandmother was born out of Willacoochee.
Katie, grandma.
Katie. Yeah. Papa's family, Papa Fielding. Now this is my mother's side. The first I know of them, they were in Memphis, Tennessee, and the grandfather was a tailor. During the Civil War, he lost a leg and died. And grandmother with her 15, 17 children, I don't remember which it was, by
Your
covered
grandmother.
wagon.
Yeah.
No, great-grandmother. Migrated from
Memphis.
Memphis to Jacksonville, Florida, which is now Jacksonville, Florida, to escape the fighting in the Civil War. They were destitute. They're coming across Tennessee. The Papa said that they had biscuits with lard on it, covering, a lot of meals.
How'd she get by once she migrated?
They came by covered wagon to Jacksonville and he helped lay the first tracks, narrow gauge tracks from Jacksonville to Tampa, my Papa. She had enough children that they got out and
They all
made
got
it.
work.
They got work to do and got out and did it. In those days, of course, there was no age restriction on work. Well, Papa became a watchmaker and was certified by the railroads to repair and set the timing for the railroad watches, which was critical in those days.
Sure.
They-
Still
Very-
schedules everything. Those guys.
Yeah, but they're not like they were when the watches now. Everything's computerized now.
Yeah.
But in those days, it was all by the railroad watch. They had their big watches. It was quite a thing. At any rate, you had a couple of jewelry stores. Douglas, Georgia, that is. And finally, as a result of his health, he will be forced to move out. In the meantime, my father and mother had been married, and my dad went to Florida to locate a place for him to set up business, and he found Kissimmee, and they set up a furniture store down there during the heyday of Florida boom.
Now, we don't know
And-
much about Harris.
Well, the first that I know of Papa Harris he was a rural mail carrier
Okay.
in South Georgia. And his wife, he married a Phillips. Well, the Phillips were big landowners in that part of the world. They had thousands of acres down in Coffee County. And the old slave cabins, I saw those when I was real young, where they had the plantation.
That was Harris and Phillips.
Phillips, yeah. Well, my grandmother's sister married Marcellus Jowers, and the Jowers ended up with the farm. And the last time we were there, out to Pleasant Jowers, you've probably heard me talk about Pleasant Jowers. He was the son of Marcellus and my grandmother's sister. Well, Pleasant son, the last time we were up there, was the county agent for Coffee County. But he had he was running then, I think, about 3,000 acres of the old homestead farm. But I don't know anything about the Phillips family other than they had the big plantation and
And
this
Harris,
little
you can
cabin.
just go
And the Harrises,
back to the mail carrier.
the mail carrier, but the Harrises, or the Harris Tweeds, came from
That's Scotland.
the Scotch, and the Tweed come from the Tweed River, I think, and that's where that originated, back in Scotland. Now, if you took the Harris clan as a whole, most of them would have been originated from Scotland back in antiquity. But at any rate, we got down to Kissimmee. Papa Fielding had given 6 months to live and with asthmatics. So they moved down there in 1922. And the agreement was that my Uncle Frank, that's Mother's brother, and was to have nothing to do with the business. When he came into it, then Dad got out, and eventually we moved to Leesburg, and Dad was growing watermelons, started growing watermelons. Skipping over some time there, which in 1931 then shipped the first carload of watermelons, average weight 50 pounds, out of Okahumpki, and auctioned it off for $1,150, which was the largest price I'd ever got for a carload of watermelon up till then.
Was it refrigerated?
Oh no,
Where did he ship it to?
New York City.
New York City.
But see, it was on one of these fast freights. And when they shipped melons, I had, my job was to package seltzer around them so they didn't bruise and paint the stems. They cut the melons with a stem, and there was some kind of green gook that you painted on the end. Also, you put a daub of glue on them and you put a label on the front of them. They were Tom Watson melons. In 1930, Dad grew the largest watermelon that was grown in that part of the state. It went around over 100 pounds. And it was on display in the drugstore window there in Leesburg for about a week.
I never seen one that big.
And then we ate it.
You ate it.
But it was a big melon. I was just about 9, 10 years old, but I couldn't pick half of it up. It was a heavy book. But they were big melons they grew in those years, and the melons you get today, they're small.
Yeah.
But they grow them for commercial value. These old Tom Watsons were big melons.
I want to know what a Tom Watson is.
Well, Tom Watson was, I think, one time, he was a horticulturist, but I think he was at one time a governor of Georgia, and that's where the Tom Watson melon came from. But at any rate, Dad, and the Monday before November, or Sunday before Thanksgiving, we were down at the mule lot, and he saw a mule that was favoring a foot, and he crawled over in the mule lot, and he picked it up the hoof and scraped it out with his pocket knife to see what was wrong with his foot. And he put his pocket knife back in his pocket, and the next morning he got up and he shaved, and he had an ingrowing hair on his upper lip, and he picked it with that knife, and that a week later, Monday following Thanksgiving, he died.
How old were you?
I was 11. And so we owned the home in Kissimmee. It was outside of Kissimmee on Limit Street, they called it, because that was the city limit of Kissimmee. Today it's Thacker Street.
That was the gray home?
No, this
That was on Bass.
No, this was before that.
That one was on Bass, the Gray House.
Yeah. On Lemon Street, we owned some acreage there and had a cow and a gardens and what have you. We owned that out of past of the Bass. An old pump on the back porch. It was a two-story house, big old thing. 1926 we were there, visiting. And Miami hurricane came through and they picked that house up, took it over and set it down and didn't break a window pane in it or a dish in the cupboard.
Weird.
And they tore the house up, jacking it up and put a foundation under it.
Huh.
But it was very gentle. You're very gentle. Just picked it up and set it over. But it was a big old house. And what happened to it was during the war, they were building the airport in Kissimmee they were training night fighters, World War II.
Yeah, I'm ready
And
to go to
the
Europe.
government took that farm, that house, and land as a part of the airport. And they moved the house and made it the officers club, and it later burned. It was the officers club that it burned. The officers club, and just a club, but it also had sleeping quarters. They call them, what do they call them? Wait, transit officers mess, bachelor, BOQ, bachelor officer quarters, yeah, BOQ. And any rate, it burned. They
Uh-oh.
bought the place on Bass Street then. But as a result of the government taking the land, they paid them, I think, $3,000 for the house and land. And they bought this place on Bass and fixed it up so it could be lived in. It hadn't been lived in 20 years. And had been abandoned, the old place on Bass Street. And but see, I'd never lived in it, in the house. I had left home, probably in the late 30s. Cut meat in the meat market. I mowed yards. But the last job I had was butchering before I got a job doing electrical work as a helper. And then I went from Kissimmee. I got with the IBEW as a second-year helper, apprentice electrician, and went down to Arcadia, Florida, was working for J.R. Heim Electrical Contractors, building barracks for the airport for Embry-Riddle, training British flying cadets, because Britain at that time was fighting and we weren't involved in the war. And they had a contract with the British to train pilots, and their basic training was there in Arcadia. They had two airports that we built there. One was Carlstrom and the other one was Dorr Fields. The last time I was by the airports, they had converted them into mental institutions. They were using the barracks as housing for the mental patients. But as Arcadia, I went from there, I decided that in order to avoid being drafted into the Army, because they had started the draft before we entered the war. They were supposed to be drafted for 1 year, and they started taking people in draft, and so I decided, to hell with this, I'd get in the shipyards. So I went in the shipyard, Tampa shipyard, as a marine electrician, and to get occupational deferment. I went from there, the union sent me up to Mobile in Gulf Shipbuilding Company to where they were wiring destroyers, building destroyers.
I didn't know all this.
And
I didn't know this.
so then I got
Me neither.
real patriotic and decided, to hell with this. I went down to Union headquarters on Saturday to pay my assessments, and on the bulletin board was a plaque that said, join the Army and assist in rebuilding utilities for skilled labor they wanted. So the idea of it was is we were supposed to go back in after the fighting is completed and rebuild the utilities for areas that were destroyed.
Huh.
So I signed up. I volunteered for it, and we were supposed to be given rank immediately upon being assigned.
That's you.
So
Yeah.
we went. I found out then you don't volunteer for anything. So we were put on a train to Falmouth, Massachusetts,
Oh boy.
and went into Camp Edwards, Mass. This was in July. And we were in a barracks there. They'd given us barracks assigned, say about 600 of us. So there was a series of barracks there that were just a whole bunch of people. They're floating around. All the thing we did was go down and eat, come back, go to PX, fiddle around because there's nothing to do. So one morning they came up and they called everybody outside, come on out. So outside we went, and there was about 600 there. There was steam fitters, electricians, welders, carpenters, skilled labor, pipe fitters, the whole bit. So they filled us all out and they said, now just call this group of names, you go out over here. Well, they called out a group of names, there was about 200 of them. They went over there. They called the next group of names, you come over here. 200 of them, they went over here. Well, we said, now, your company G, H, and I, the 36 combat engineers. Oh, that's all right. Combat engineers at that time
Got a good ring.
didn't really bother me that much.
Wasn't being an
But
engineer.
then
Or combat would get.
Then they said, has anybody in here ever had any close order drill? What in the hell's close order drill? You just walk where we wanted to go, you know, when you wanted to go. Well, so they decided that we had to have some close order drill, so they get us out and start showing that we had one old geezer there that'd been in the Navy, I guess, before, and he had been drafted. I know he hadn't been drafted. He volunteered. They sucked him in too on this because we were all volunteers. And so he had some close order drill sometime in the past. He was up in years. And so he got out and made his demonstrations on how it was supposed to be. So he got all us out by squad, 12 to a squad. You follow around do the same. So this is how they started teaching us how to do close order drill. Well, then they started out, you didn't walk anywhere. You ran. The only time you walked was when you're doing close order drill. We'd get you up in the morning before daylight, and you'd run 2 miles to an obstacle course. You'd do the obstacle course, and then you'd run back. They'd give you 15 minutes to get ready for your breakfast. You got your breakfast, and then you come out and you start it again. And then when they got us so that we could do close order drill and what have you, they decided that now we were amphibious engineers. So it was a regiment, a full regiment, but of course we just knew that this 3 group we were in was 1 battalion, that's all we. And so, okay, we went out in Buzzards Bay and started practicing beach landing, but our primary job was to make the invasion and to move material across the beach. Well, that's good on a beach, you know, when nobody's bothering you, it's fine, you can have fun doing that. But we developed some wire with burlap in back of it to lay down on the sand so the tanks and the what have you could run across it, pull the artillery and all that good stuff. And so that worked out real well. We decided that was fine. Then one evening late, this was in month of August. I missed that because I got pneumonia from one of these playing around in Buzzards Bay in the middle of the night, getting wet, laying around wet all night. I got pneumonia and they put me in the hospital, and for the month of August, that's where I was. So I got back out of the hospital, and I wasn't a very short time after that. They fell us out one night, late in the evening, and they says, line up to the supply tent, or no, what's the tent, the building. And so there we were issued a rifle and a gas mask and a steel helmet. And, okay, we got us a steel helmet now, a rifle and a gas mask. So about the next day, they marched us down, put us on a train for Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Got down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, got tied in with the 3rd Division. And the first thing we knew about that, why, old George Patton was making a speech to the division about the blood and the guts and what we were going to do to the damn MFs and all this good stuff. Language is beautiful.
He fire you up?
He disgusted her.
Yeah.
Fire you up. But anyway, he got it through with his blood and guts speech, and
Well, we haven't seen the side of Patton.
oh, I tell you, there's two people in this world that I could have cheerfully killed, and he was one of them.
Who's
But,
the other one?
He was a clown.
They say the men hated him, though.
Oh, I tell you, that man was from hunger. But we get into that a long time down the road about him. But he was a firm believer in after we get into action, attack. You didn't give a damn what. You attack. So if you're overwhelmed, you're outnumbered, and you attack against a much superior force, well, you're going to get your ass beat. And we did. And you come out with about half or less than half of the people you went in with, and they're coming in back of you, because they broke your main line of resistance. And, strictly talking about old George, he was a number.
The real story.
But anyway, we haven't made the invasion yet. But we got with for the 3rd Division, then I finally made a 25-mile hike, 125-mile hike, full field gear. And never dug a slit trench, never dug a foxhole. And they decided time to hit the ship. So when I was in Tappa Shipbuilding Company, one of the jobs I had was working on the Exeter, which was a old passenger, combination passenger freighter that they used to, the Dollar Lines owned it. It was an old ship. And it was ready for the scrap heap, and I'd worked on it, on the Tampa. And they moved us out of Virginia to Newport News, and as we're walking down the gang was walking down the dock, I told the lieutenant, I said, we don't get on that son of a bitch, it'll sink before it gets over there. I worked on that one, I know it. And that's the one we got on. So at any rate, they made up a convoy. Then they decided we'd better fire rifles and learn how to operate those and bazookas and stuff. They'd issued all this stuff to us. And so they got us on the fantail of the ship, and that's where we're shooting off out in the water to get to practice.
And that's the practice you had?
Well, that was our training. Well, at any rate, they got us on that. We had a whole bunch of LCVPs, that's landing craft vehicle personnel. And they were little Higgins boats made out of plywood. And we had little wells up there in the front. It's all plywood. They're not going to stop anything. And they had machine guns up here and then the ramp was down between them, and the coxswain standing up here in the wide open spaces out in the back, and we're down in the hole of this thing, or not the hole, but down on the deck of it, and when they lower the ramp, you run off, see. And they're supposed to be covering your fire from the Higgins boat with these machine guns. But we hit the beaches there in Fidela. Well, get back to it. We're out off the coast of Africa, and the Navy's made a big snafu. We're not in position. And so, as we're supposed to be hit the beach already, Roosevelt's making a speech. The town's lit up. I mean, Fidela, Morocco, lights on. Roosevelt's making a speech beamed at Morocco, the African, North Africa, that the American troops are there as friends, you know, not as enemies and what have you, all this good stuff. At any rate, the lights start going off all the way across town. And so he's telling them we're going to hit, you know. So they start to get ready for you, you know. At any rate, we hit the beach. It's daylight by the time we got everything lined up to get in. Yeah. 75% of the troops that hit the beach were green, you know. Hell, people get hurt with loaded guns when they run around like that. So 75% of them hit the beach without their rifles being loaded. We didn't know what the hell was going on. So we hit the beach and get run up on it. And next thing I know, the damn plane come over and strafed us. But that was the initiation, I thought.
That was when you said I wanted to come home.
Old George Patton was, of course, commanding officer of the invasion and the African operation. And we went in in Fidela, Morocco, went down to Casablanca, and then moved us up to Rabat, which was north of Fidela, and we moved into the Cork Forest, which is right on the Spanish-Moroccan border, because at that time we didn't know whether Spain was going to enter the war on the side of Germany or not. See, Germany had helped Franco defeat the nationalists in Spain and the Spanish Revolution, and so they were friendly with the Axis powers, so we outposted that until they determined that Spain wasn't going to come into it. And then they moved us from there up into Algiers and Oran, and then on from there into Tunisia. But in Africa, we had been there for some time, and it finally got de Gaulle came down, and Patton was to come to town, and they wanted us to stand honor guard for him. And so we had to, we were at that particular time bivouacked in cup tents, and we had to press uniforms. Nobody had an iron to press a uniform or anything else, so at any rate, we were supposed to be all gussied out, full uniform for Patton and de Gaulle, and a little town of Faribault, I think it was. No, it wasn't Faribault, I think it was Arzu. It's in Algiers, up on the Mediterranean Sea. And at any rate, we stood guard, and then as they were breaking up, these company commanders had the troops present honor guard. So Patton says, "Captain, take those troops down through town and show them what American soldiers look like." So off we marched down through town. So, at any rate, we went up from there on into Tunisia. And they come out with Army orders that if you were caught without a steel helmet on, the fighting was over. Summary court-martial, $25 fine. If your wristwatch was below the cuff of your sleeve, it was a $25 fine. Summary court-martial. And just all kinds of crap. This is Pat. Come out. Well, there's an awful lot of MPs killed trying to enforce this stuff because the troops had already been in action and they weren't about to take a bunch of crap. And so there was a lot of inter-fighting among American troops over some of the orders that they were trying to enforce, and finally they just got lax. Matter of fact, after the fighting in Tunisia was over, and they'd give troops passes to go into a town, I, as a non-com, had to walk the town streets with a 45 to keep the EMPs from our troops. So it got pretty hairy there one time. One place we were going to destroy the MP headquarters. They had Thompson submachine guns out. The MPs did. Till cooler heads prevailed, our captain came and worked it out. But when he got word of what was going on, but we were going to attack them and tear them down.
A little bit of a revolution in there.
But at any rate, this was Pat, and it quieted down quite a bit then. But then when they got into Sicily, I didn't make the Sicilian invasion because I'd been wounded in Tunisia and was unfit for duty. So they left me in the rear echelon. I had 27 half-tracks and anti-tank guns I was to bring over as the second echelon. And I rejoined the outfit in Palermo. And we finished that up, went back to Africa again. Then we were supposed to we were then become attached to the 82nd Airborne. And we were to run up the Tiber River with landing craft and take the bridges over the Tiber River and hold them for 24 hours. And then if we weren't relieved, we were supposed to destroy the bridges and infiltrate back down the inner mountain range of Italy to meet invasion troops coming in. And thank God that Italy surrendered before this came about, so they thought that Italy surrendering that we could walk through, and so we made the invasion of Salerno rather than the Tiber River operation. And going into Salerno, we ran into a German Panzer division practicing anti-invasion maneuvers on the beachhead. And since Italy had surrendered, they didn't pre-bombard the coast. So they hit the beach. The first wave was infantry. Hit the beach, it was annihilated. And the second wave was annihilated. And we hit it along about the third wave, and some of us, wherever we were, that was the further point of penetration. And we were using ships' guns as artillery because they had nothing on shore yet. They had British monitors there. They had 2 British monitors with 14-inch rifles, and we had a couple of cruisers and destroyers. And those British monitors with 14-inch guns were firing 2,000-pound projectiles, and we were calling fire with those things. And it was a real nip and tuck operation. We had... All right, bye. You're leaving? Oh my.
We stopped for a minute.
Have fun. So, at any rate, the invasion of Salerno, we were in dire straits. We were about to be run off the thing. They put us in a line as infantry. The 45th Division had a battalion that had been cut off. They opened up and let them in and closed them back up. So we were supposed to go in and break through to relieve them. 36th Division was the initial assault troops used in the invasion, and they just lost so many of the personnel that they were not able to function as a division because they'd lost their major portion of their troops on the initial assault. And the 45th Division was a part of the invasion crew too, and they had, the battalion had been cut off. We were dug in positions. Well, we attempted to go in to relieve them, and we just wasn't any way to do it because they had this Panzer or armored division in there. And so we were dug into position. We went into, again, the second time we were going in to relieve them. We ran into a bunch of tanks, and we were out in the open field, and I hit a little ditch, a little bit of a defilade, and crawled back into the edge of the woods. And we dug in a defensive position there, and we were told that this is as far as you go. I mean, you either die or else, because we only had furthest penetration, roughly.
We'll go in the house. No, you don't. We'll be out in
A mile and a half or 2 miles is all we'd ever gotten in. And the tanks run along the edge of the woods, they're machine gunning people. And during the night, evidently in my slit trench, I had gone to sleep. And I didn't know that in back of me, right in back of my position there where I was they had brought in a tank destroyer, an M10 tank destroyer, one of them. And the next day, the Germans started in. They brought the 5 tanks, came back out through the woods, and this M10 tank destroyer, they had a 3-inch naval rifle on them. And it fired an HE round. There was a tree in the way, and they fired an HE round at that tree, and when they did, of course, it was back of me, and I said, oh, hell, you're gone, you're through. But it didn't happen that way. They fired that HE round, and as soon as they knocked that tree out of the way, they put 3 rounds through it, just like as fast as you could fire your rifle almost. Armor piercing, then knocked out 3 tanks. The other 2 got out. They left. And that we held that position. It started burning the records, maps and everything, because they figured we were going to be run off. But we persevered, and they brought in some more troops, and we finally broke through their position. In the meantime, I was in a group that we infiltrated the German line by platoon, and we got behind them, and we were to just create all kinds of problems we could, whatever, to destroy communications and whatever. And it's where I was trench knifed there, and then we came back into our lines at night.
You were what?
I had a trench knife stuck in my buttock. I was down on a knee, and the guy lunged for me. I stood up. He hit me, instead of hitting me up, he hit me in the buttock. But it was one of our troops. He caught my silhouette. It was night, and he couldn't yell. So,
I'd have yelled
at any
anyway.
rate, we infiltrated back into our own lines that night, and I went back to the hospital. But then I rejoined the outfit.
Where'd you meet them at? Where'd you meet them? Same place?
What, the outfit?
Yeah.
No, they began in advance. We'd broken them then.
I'm gonna get up.
Where'd you go then?
Well, we started moving up the peninsula, and I rejoined the outfit back before they got into a leaf. I was only gone a few days. And,
Now, all this
We
time
went
you
on
were
then-
still to meet some kind of invasion force that was coming in? I mean, that was your objective with the...
no, we were
thing?
combat engineers then.
I mean, but weren't you supposed to come down? Weren't you supposed to meet an invasion force somewhere?
Well, no,
on the
no,
other
this was canceled, you know, when,
Because
and
of
because
Italy.
Italy surrendered.
side? Oh, I see. I guess I remember that.
And then then instead of doing that, we made the invasion of Salerno. But then we moved on up the peninsula to the Volturno River, which was the next big crossing. Had a big river plain in the mountains. We were up in the mountains at that time, huh? And where they could put a squad of troops up on top of the mountain.
The Germans.
Yeah, with our observation, and they could hold off an army.
What was that monastery deal was?
Well, this is coming into that area. We went up as far as Cali, the little town of Cali, which is right at Monte Cassino. And then Monte Cassino, when they started trying to take that, we pulled out of that, and they were going to make a flanking attack. We made the invasion of Anzio to go in backup rather than try to come up and take Monte Cassino. We saw that that was going to be a major problem, and so we made the Anzio beachhead. But the problem with the Anzio beachhead, we didn't have enough troops. Because the first day we were on the Anzio beachhead, we took prisoners 9 miles out of Rome. I mean, we were right there, but you didn't have enough troops to hold it. So we had to pull back, and we ended up a 10-mile beachhead. Was all we had, just a 10-mile strip. And we had the British 56th had a brigade in there. We had a special service forces, had the 3rd Division, and had Rangers. Well, we were there for, they were trying to push, they reinforced themselves pretty heavy, but the British 56th and the Rangers were going to make an attempt to break off after they'd stabilized a little bit, and they did. They made a determined attack. Well, the Rangers lost all their troops. I mean, there was not a handful of them got out of it. And the British 56th Division, they put us in as infantry for the British then, because their brigade came out and they probably had 150, 200 troops was all they had left out of it. Because they were annihilated. So we took up the positions with the British 56th Division. And see, every inch of this beachhead was under artillery fire. And we were there in that position until they started the break off, to break through. The British 56 finally got enough replacements in to take our places. So we come out of there, and they shifted us down to take the places of the Special Service Forces, which was an American-Canadian outfit, a combination. And they were supposed to be, they were the, probably what would be the elite corps of the Army at that time. The Rangers were, but they had been annihilated. And then the Special Forces were as good as or better than, I don't know, the Rangers. So they took them to spearhead a break-off. But they brought us in to take their place. And this is when they started up the time on delivery or time on target artillery barrages, and they'd pick a segment of the map in our advance, and it took 1,000 artillery pieces, and they fired them in sequence, 15 minutes in the evening, 15 minutes in the morning, so that these 1,000 artillery shells detonated at the same instant, and these areas that they picked to break off. And it was something. We'd stand in our foxholes at night and watch the guns firing, and you'd see the 75 millimeters fire, and then the 105 howitzers and the long toms, and just work on back, you know, to the 240 millimeters, and even the ships out in the bay were firing, because the 1,000 artillery pieces concentrated in these areas, and when we broke out of there, you could step from hole to hole just damn near where they hit, and what few troops were in there, most of them were idiots. They were just completely addled. And so we broke off the beachhead. And then our job was to reach down and meet the Fifth Army, and then swing back around and then go back into the mountains and form a line across the peninsula of Italy. And we went into the little town of Valletta, and we were going to take the next little town north of there, and we were laid out in the ditches on either side of the place. And the MPs came up in a jeep, and they rode right by us, and they looked as they went by. They went up and they tacked us. Is it running?
Yep.
But they were supposed to take this little village, and it was a walled village, and there was quite a number of streets in it, several streets, and there were. Our company was to attack one side, and then the platoon was over at another gate, and another company was supposed to come in from the other side of the town, and these MPs had put the town off limits, so they come back and they stopped, and he said, "Who the hell are you?" And I said, "We're supposed to take that town, but you made it off limits. You just go on and take it." And he said, they got in their little jeep and took off. So anyway, we started in the town, and first thing you know, you hear a Tommy gun start firing. Uh-oh, we're going to start this house-to-house canvas, you know. That's about the toughest fighting there is, trying to rout out of town. And we kept going up, didn't find anything. So finally, found a German uniform and the edge of going down into a basement there in the cellar, and went down in the cellar, and here's these huge hogsheads of wine. I haven't had any opposition yet, so fired the Tommy guns into the hogshead of wine, and we started drinking wine out of a canteen cup. And there's a whole battalion. In my company, there were 2 sober men that night. The company commander, the medic, and the next day they got drunk. But they had to pinch our whole battalion out of the attack because they were all drunk. So we got a break. We had nothing to do there for 2 or 3 days. Everybody sobered up and got ready to go again. Anyway,
Will they meet any resistance in that town?
not in that town, no. They had evacuated, they'd gone. But the Tommy gun we heard firing was, they'd found a liquor store, and they were shooting the tops off the back bar to get drink. They got in their drinks. Somebody decided, to hell with it, and when you open it, we'd shoot it off. So at any rate, we went on through the town and outposted on the other side of the town, a little alley in a crossroads, in a ditch with a machine gun all night, and couldn't get up the next morning. Inflamed tissues in my legs. had to have somebody help me up. Once I was up, I was all right, but I couldn't get up. And a day or two later, I just finally they sent me back to the hospital ship and took me back to Naples to the hospital. And I got back there and I got malaria. But they said it was inflamed tissues in the leg muscles. But, I got malaria, and by the time I rejoined the outfit, they were back in a staging area getting ready to hit the coast of France. So I made that one. I made the invasion there and started to move up the Rhone Valley, and they were throwing mortar ammunition off the truck. We're unloading it. The guys were throwing it, in the metal base of the bed of the truck. But I threw it too hard, and it went off the tailgate and come down across my foot. It squished my big toe there, flattened it right out. They thought they were going to have to amputate it for a while, and found out that if I amputated it, why I'd be crippled, limp the rest of my life. And they said, you'd have to send you home, so I told them to take it off. But they wouldn't. Yeah. They sent me back, and then I got it infected.
You tried, huh?
Well, it got infection because you're in the boots and dirty all the time. And never bathe, never wash your feet.
That's where Dave gets it from.
What?
Not bathing.
No. And I was quite a while there. I was going up the Rhone Valley, and we went on up into took Strasbourg on the Rhine, then the Free French wanted Leclerc. Thought they should have that, so they pulled us out of Strasbourg and moved us south of there on the Rhine. And then we were there for a while, and then moved us north of Strasbourg to look up above Epinal and Alsace and Lorraine. And we wintered there. And then crossed the Rhine at Memmingen and then swung down through the Black Forest. But the Battle of the Bulge took place just out of Epinal we were, and we fell back.
I had an uncle in the Battle of the Bulge.
Well, we were just south of the Major Drive. We fell back about 4 or 5 miles. And then started back again. And that's when I was ZI'd.
You were what?
ZI'd in zone of interior, unfit for further combat duty. It was battle fatigue, they called it. Yeah. So from there on, I was transferred into a topographical unit, and I became a recon sergeant, supposedly making and remaking maps of Germany, parts of Germany. And we moved on through and ended up the war down in Mittenwald, they called it, a little village down in Bavaria, right on the Austrian border. And we met the Russians down there. I was about tired of it.
Weren't you there when the sent them to the concentration camp?
Well, yeah,
Yeah, talk about
that was
that.
passing on through. That was moving
Talk about
through
that
the.
too, so
well,
we can have that down. Because a lot of people today say that's rumors.
Oh no, that's not.
No, I know,
There are
I
too many
know.
people. You've got
But-
backwaters there in Athens. He was at Auschwitz, I think. He was in liberating that, and he was there. And
See the guy that died? That was
Admit-
getting that thing together and died?
backwaters, no,
Oh.
he's there in Athens.
Well, they say everybody that has a story ought to document it. So you do it and we'll document
Well,
it. Truly.
I don't know. We passed through so quick. See, we found a bunch of POWs, too, that had been taken POW. And then the concentration camp, well, I don't remember the name of the place. It was pretty quick after we got, I'd have to see a map to see how I came through there. I don't remember where it was, but it was a slave labor camp, concentration camp. They were using, they had dug out a mountain, and they were making ball bearings. They had miles of tunnels, and they had machine shops and everything down in there, and there's no way you're going to get them out. And on top of this knoll was a concentration camp. In other words, if you bombed them, you'd kill the labor, you wouldn't get down to it. But there were.
So human shields was the.
Well, it was
there's a precedent.
They had no use for them. In other words, if you killed them, that took them away from. I mean, that.
But also
didn't
a
have to
deterrent
bother
for
with
bombing it too, right?
No, they didn't know what they were.
Okay.
They didn't have any idea. We got that. But they were, like I said, I wouldn't have an idea where it was, except that you see the people, and the knee would be big, and the thigh would be like your wrist, just bone, all they were, just bone and a big knuckle wherever there was a joint. Just the skin was tight on them, and they couldn't get up or anything. They're just grabbing you as you went by, you know, and trying to thank you. And you couldn't feed them because their stomachs were such that they couldn't eat. They just, and smell. But it was, well, I don't know. It was just something you don't dwell on. See how people could be that cruel to another human being, misuse them that way, but they're still doing it. So
We do it everywhere.
it's not. The man is the most cruel animal I think there is. Most animals will kill to eat. But other than that, most animals don't kill at all. They might fight, but they don't fight to death. There's none of that. The only animals, the carnivorous, they'll kill to eat. But man is the only one that will destroy his own kind just maliciously out of no use at all. But these slave laborers, as long as they could work them, they feed them something like 950 calories a day until they got so weak. Until they got so weak they couldn't work, then do away with it. But we got in there before they could do away with a lot of it. Their efficiency was at disposing of human beings was awfully good, but it was just a mass that they couldn't destroy all of them at one time. But they were working at it.
Is that the only concentration camp you saw?
No, that was the only one I saw. The only other, I saw inmates from other concentration camps, but I didn't see I saw in the hospital there in this little town of Mittenwald, they had a bunch of them there that Jewish that had been in contact. And again, we went through it. They grabbing at you as you went by, and, you know, the doctors and the nurses would, of course, saying they knew nothing about this thing, and what can we do? Can you help us with these people? Whatever. So we, of course, tell the medics and let them do what could be done for them. But it was really it was a mess.
Well, they were able to recover those, weren't they?
Some no, some were too far gone. There were many of them died. They couldn't. They were
Couldn't
so
eat.
far gone that they couldn't eat. And if they ate, they'd just throw up. You know, they couldn't keep anything. But then some, of course, if they, with very tender love and care, they saved a lot of them. But this one concentration camp, it wasn't there, but the commanding officer, the divisional commander, went into the town. He went into the concentration camp, and he went in and told the burgomaster, he says, I want every living soul in this town out here. And I want them to go through this place. And he made them go through. He took armed guards and made all the people in that village, the town, go through this place to see what they had been doing. They all claimed, of course, they didn't know that this was going on. And a lot of them didn't. But there were a lot that did know. They had to know.
When you were a girl, Gertrude, she was a German girl, and she said that, her family said they didn't know what was going on.
There were a lot of them. There were a lot of good German people that opposed Hitler, but they couldn't do anything, and they didn't. It would be like we would be right now. If you,
They'd have
you
been
were
dead.
faced with a rebellion, you didn't do it. But there were an awful lot of German people that hid Jewish people, and there were a lot of good German people, and I respected them. There were, as a whole, I think the German people are good people. There were just a few that got in power and took over and dictated what was to take place. And when they lost control, when they disarmed the people, there was nothing they could do to control them. The army did.
Well, would you, all right, now tell me
Well,
when you started writing.
I was a platoon sergeant, and in my platoon was a replacement. One of the people had been sent in to replace somebody had been gone, and by the name of Robleski. And Robleski's wife was working in a war plant in Buffalo, and Ruth was working at the same place. And so Robleski's wife was writing a letter to her husband. He says, anybody want to write to anybody over there? And Ruth says, well, I'll write. So she wrote a letter, and she enclosed it in the letter to Robleski. And we had put a Bailey bridge across a little river, creek, and we fell back into a little farmhouse for a break and slept there. And then in the afternoon, everybody was cleaning their guns, rifles, and whatever, and writing home. And I was moaning because I didn't have a girlfriend to write to. And Robleski says, here's a letter, write, if you want to write a letter. So he gave me Ruth's letter from Ruth. So I wrote her a letter, and that started the correspondence. And then in the year, I guess, before I got back home, and we continued on, and I sent her the money to come down to Leesburg. I was working in the post office then. And she came down, and we decided that the thing to do was to get together. So on Christmas Eve in 1945, I asked her if she would marry me, and she went back home, and then I went up in April, and we were married, moved to Florida.
That started the Harris Dynasty. And look how it has grown.